The letter was slipped under William's door at 3:14 in the morning. He knew the exact time because Smoky woke him, not with barking, but with something far more unsettling. A low, sustained growl that vibrated to the bedroom floor like a warning signal from deep underground. William had spent 22 years reading that dog's body language the way other men read newspapers. When Smoky growled like that, chest low, hackles risen in a ridge from neck to tail, something was genuinely wrong. William Wynne sat up in bed, his 50-year-old frame moving with the deliberate economy of a man who had once cleared buildings in Fallujah before breakfast. The salt and pepper buzz cut the broad shoulders, the square jaw, none of it softened in sleep. He looked the same awake as he did unconscious, immovable. He pulled on his worn cargo pants and padded barefoot to the front door, his moss-green eyes already adjusting to the dark. The envelope lay on the mat. No stamp, no return address. Just his name typed in clean Arial font, Mr. Wynne. Inside a single page, a formal petition signed by 11 of his 12 neighbors on Callaway Lane, requesting that the Hargrove County Housing Committee review his residency status due to, and this was a phrase that made his jaw tighten, ongoing safety concerns posed by his animal and his personal history. Smoky pressed his black and tan flank against William's leg. 70 pounds of coiled German shepherd muscle reading the tension in his partner's stillness. William set the letter on the kitchen counter. He filled Smoky's water bowl. He made himself a black coffee. He did not sleep again that night. And he had absolutely no idea that within 3 weeks, the people who signed that letter will be the ones with everything to hide. If you're new here, hit that follow button and drop a like. Stories like this one are why this channel exists. Callaway Lane was the kind of street that looked like a real estate brochure and felt like a hell breath. 12 houses, manicured lawns, matching mailboxes in brushed bronze. A homeowners association that sent passive-aggressive notices about trash bin placement with the efficiency of a federal agency. William had moved here 14 months ago, after the VA helped him secure the property following his medical discharge. A modest single-story with a fenced yard large enough for Smoky to run without destroying the neighbor's sense of aesthetic order. Or so he believed. The problem started small. Mrs. Patricia Holden at number 4 sent a handwritten note within his first week. Your dog's presence makes my grandchildren uncomfortable when they visit. William had responded politely, explaining Smoky's training credentials, his K-9 operative certification, his impeccable behavioral record across 2 combat deployments. The note he received back contained one sentence: credentials don't change how people feel. Then came the HOA complaint about his truck, a decade-old F-250 that he maintained in perfect mechanical condition, but which apparently disrupted the visual cohesion of the lane. Then a formal request that he install privacy screening on his front porch because, according to number 7's resident Gerald Marsh, William had a habit of sitting outside in the early morning hours, and it made people uneasy. William sat outside because Smoky needed the air. He sat in the dark because he didn't sleep past 4 a.m. anymore. He hadn't since Kandahar. He'd tried to be reasonable. He'd tried to be invisible. The petition told him invisibility wasn't enough. What he didn't know yet What nobody on Callaway Lane knew he was capable of figuring out was that the campaign against him wasn't about property values at all. It was about keeping him from noticing what was happening 3 doors down. The Hargrove County Housing Committee held its monthly open session in a beige conference room above the post office on Mineral Street. William arrived 7 minutes early, wearing clean dark jeans and a collared shirt. Smoky heeled perfectly at his left side on a tactical lead. The room went quiet when he walked in. 11 of his 12 neighbors were already seated in a semicircle of folding chairs. He recognized all of them. Gerald Marsh from number 7, ruddy-faced, self-appointed spokesman for anything requiring a clipboard. Patricia Holden from number 4, in her pearls and practiced indignation. The Delacroix couple from number 9, who had never once made eye contact with William, but apparently had no difficulty signing their names to a document calling him a threat. The 12th neighbor, the only one absent from the petition, was a quiet, retired schoolteacher named Eunice Faber at number 11. She gave William a small nod from the corner. He nodded back. Committee Chairwoman Sandra Briggs opened the session with the tone of someone who had already decided the outcome and merely needed the paperwork to catch up. Mr. Wynne, the committee has received a formal petition expressing safety concerns regarding. I read it, William said. His voice was low, unhurried. The moss-green eyes moved around the room without hostility, simply cataloging. I'd like to know specifically what incident prompted 11 signatures in a single evening. Silence. Gerald Marsh cleared his throat. It's not about one incident. It's about a pattern of... Name the pattern. More silence. Smoky sat with the patience of a statue at William's heel, his black and tan coat gleaming under the fluorescent light, his amber eyes scanning the room with unsettling precision. 3 people in the semicircle shifted in their seats. William noticed which 3. Gerald Marsh had prepared notes. He unfolded them with the ceremony of a man who had rehearsed this moment in his bathroom mirror. Mr. Wynne, he began, the residents of Callaway Lane have documented multiple instances of your dog behaving in a threatening manner toward pedestrians, children, and... Which pedestrians? Gerald blinked. I beg your pardon? Names, dates, which specific pedestrians felt threatened and on which specific dates. William had his own notepad out. The pen cap came off with a quiet click. I'll wait. Gerald's documentation apparently lacked this level of granularity. He shuffled his papers. The general consensus of the community. The general consensus isn't evidence, Mr. Marsh. William said it without heat, the way a man states that water is wet. I spent 2 decades working with evidence. What you described to this committee is an impression, not a documented incident. I'd like the distinction noted for the record. Sandra Briggs, to her credit, wrote something down. Patricia Holden leaned forward, her pearls catching the light. Mr. Wynne, it isn't only about the dog. People have concerns about your background, your history. The room temperature seemed to drop. My history, William repeated. Military service can leave people changed. Patricia smoothed her skirt. We simply want to ensure Callaway Lane remains a safe environment for families. The moss green eyes settled on her with an expression that wasn't anger, something quieter than that, and somehow harder. Mrs. Holden, I was AK-9 handler and military police specialist. I spent my career making environments safe for people. If my history is a concern, I'd suggest this committee consider it more carefully before using it as grounds for the kind of action this petition implies. In the back row, Eunice Faber was nodding slowly. In the front row, the Delacroix couple was not looking at anyone. The committee meeting produced nothing actionable. Sandra Briggs had enough procedural integrity to recognize the petition for what it was, which was grievance dressed as safety concern, but it produced something else William hadn't anticipated, a clarity about his neighbors that felt like reading a map of terrain he'd been walking blind. He drove home through the October dark with Smoky in the back seat, the dog's broad head turned toward the window, watching the streetlights pass. It was when they turned onto Callaway Lane that it happened for the first time. Smoky went rigid. Not the warning growl stillness of that first night with the letter. This was different. The full K-9 alert posture that William hadn't seen outside of operational context in 3 years. Spine straight, ears forward and locked, nostrils working in rapid short pulls. Every muscle in the 70-pound body transformed from passenger to instrument. William eased the truck to a stop and watched Smoky's nose. The dog was pointed directly at number 6, the Renner property. Dean Renner, 40-something, drove a late-model Audi, worked in private equity consulting. According to a brief conversation William had managed before Renner found reasons to end it. Wife Claire rarely visible. No children. The house was always precisely maintained. Shutters painted, hedges clipped, porch lights on a timer. Renner had been the third signature on the petition. "What do you smell, buddy?" William said quietly. Smoky didn't move for 43 seconds. William counted. He'd learned years ago to give the dog time to process, never to rush an alert. When Smoky finally broke posture, he turned and looked directly at William with that amber-eyed expression that meant, "I've registered it. We come back to this." William put the truck in gear. They would come back to this. Whatever the committee meeting had accomplished procedurally, it had accomplished nothing socially. The week that followed brought an escalation that had the organized feel of a coordinated effort rather than organic neighborhood tension. Someone filed a noise complaint with animal control, citing Smoky's aggressive barking between 2 and 4 a.m. on 3 consecutive Tuesdays. William kept a written log of those exact nights. Smoky had been silent on all 3. An animal control officer named Terrence visited, apologetic and clearly uncomfortable, inspected Smoky's credentials and the property, and departed with the body language of a man who knew he was being used as a tool. Then William's truck was ticketed twice in a week for improper parking, despite being parked entirely within his own driveway, an inch from where it always sat. Then the HOA, energized by Gerald Marsh's newfound purpose, sent a formal notice claiming that William's exterior lights were non-compliant with association standards. William pulled out his original residency agreement. No such standard existed. He sent a 9-paragraph response citing page and clause numbers. The HOA did not respond. Eunice Faber knocked on his door on a Wednesday afternoon with a casserole dish and an expression of determined apology. "I want you to know I didn't sign it," she said. "I know," William said. "Thank you, Eunice." Dean Renner organized it. She said it like she was relieved to put the words somewhere outside herself. "He went door to door the night before it appeared under your door. I watched him from my window." William held the casserole dish and filed this information in the place where useful things went. "Does Renner have late-night visitors?" he asked casually. Eunice blinked. "Now that you mention it. Yes, the same van. White. No markings. It comes around midnight. Stays maybe an hour. I assumed it was some kind of service. Plumbing, perhaps." She paused. Although plumbers don't usually arrive at midnight, William had spent enough years in military intelligence-adjacent work to know that patterns, like bones, reveal themselves most clearly under the right kind of pressure. He started keeping notes. Not obsessively. He was not a man given to obsession, but systematically. The kind of systematic attention that had once helped him track insurgent supply routes across 60. Kilometers of contested territory could certainly manage one residential cul-de-sac in Hargrove County. The white van, it appeared on Tuesdays and Fridays, always between 11:45 p.m. and 12:30 a.m., always a different vehicle. Same color, same approximate size, but different license plates. 2 men. Brief exchange at the side door of number 6, never the front. The porch light on its timer would click off at midnight exactly, leaving the side door exchange in convenient shadow. Dean Renner's private equity consulting apparently required a lot of late-night logistical support. William's military training told him 4 things this could be, in descending order of severity. He put aside and focused on what he confirmed rather than what he suspected. Smoky confirmed it every time they returned home. The alert, that rigid, locked, operational posture, was now a reliable feature of their evening walks. The dog's nose would swing toward number 6 with precision of a compass needle finding north. Once, during a midday walk, Smoky stopped dead on the sidewalk in front of the Renner property and refused to move for nearly a full minute, his amber eyes fixed on the side of the house. A woman walking her poodle across the street to avoid them. William didn't blame her. Smoky in full alert was not a comfortable thing to witness. What the woman didn't understand, what none of his neighbors understood, because understanding it would have required knowing what Smoky had been trained to detect, was that the dog wasn't alerting to danger. Smoky was alerting to something far more specific than that. He didn't talk about it much, never had. But on a slow Sunday morning, sitting on the porch that apparently made his neighbors uneasy, drinking his second black coffee with Smoky stretched across his boots like a large, breathing rug, William allowed himself to think about how he'd ended up here. The buzz cut had been salt and pepper for 6 years now. The deep crow's feet at the corners of his moss-green eyes were the kind you earned, not the kind that simply arrived with age. The forehead wrinkles had settled in during his 3rd deployment, when he'd spent 11 months in a state of sustained alertness that rewired something fundamental about the way his nervous system processed rest. He'd been a good soldier, better than good. He'd been the kind of specialist that units requested by name. because of his ability to work with dogs in high-pressure environments and his particular talent for reading situations that didn't announce themselves. Smoky had been his partner for 7 years. They'd been through 4 operational deployments together and a medical evacuation that William didn't discuss. The short box beard, black now streaked with silver, had grown in during his hospital recovery. He'd kept it because Smoky seemed to find it reassuring to sniff a small, undignified detail that William had never shared with another living person. The scar along his left forearm, partially visible beneath his rolled sleeve, was from a situation in which Smoky had actually saved his life. The dog bore a corresponding scar along his right flank, hidden under the black and tan coat. They'd been medically discharged together. The VA had helped them find the house on Callaway Lane. And now 11 people wanted them gone. William scratched behind Smoky's ears. The dog's tail moved once, a slow, considered wag. "We're not going anywhere," William said. Smoky's amber eyes said he already knew. It happened on a Saturday afternoon that smelled like cut grass and coming autumn. William was replacing a section of fencing in his front yard. Actual fence work, physical and straightforward. The kind of task that required his broad shoulders and let his mind run free, when Dean Renner came across the lawn. He was well-dressed for yard proximity. Pressed chinos, a collared shirt, the kind of casual that costs money, dark hair, early 40s, the practiced smile of a man who had learned that a certain expression closed certain conversations before they became inconvenient. Smoky's head came up from where he rested in a patch of sunlight. The dog didn't growl. He watched. "William," Renner said, as though they had the kind of relationship that used first names. "Got a minute?" "Working," William said without stopping. The fence post came loose with a clean pull. He set it aside. "I'll be brief." Renner positioned himself in the way people did when they wanted to seem casual, but had chosen their angle deliberately. "I think we got off on the wrong foot at the committee meeting. That wasn't. The intention wasn't to make you feel targeted." 11 signatures, William said. Renner's smile adjusted slightly. "People have concerns. Reasonable concerns. I'm sure you understand that a neighborhood like this..." "What kind of neighborhood is this, Dean?" The first name return landed. Renner's smile recalibrated again. "A family neighborhood. Established. People have worked hard for their properties here, for their security. You understand that?" "I do," William said. He looked up for the first time, and the moss-green eyes under the deep forehead wrinkles met Renner's without accommodation. "What I don't understand is why a man who's never spoken to me longer than 4 minutes organized a legal petition against me within my first year of residence." Renner said nothing. Smoky stood up. "If you'd like to discuss concerns," William said, returning to the fence, "bring specifics. I'll be here." Renner left without another word, but he glanced at Smoky twice on his way back across the lawn. "Still with us? Please give this story a like and follow the channel. It genuinely helps, and there's a lot more coming." Eunice Faber had been teaching 8th grade history for 31 years before retirement, and she retained from that career an extremely well-developed instinct for when a situation was about to become significant. She knocked on William's door on a Tuesday evening with the energy of someone who had been waiting. to say something and had finally decided the waiting was finished. "The van came again last night," she said, before William had fully opened the door. But something was different. There were 3 men this time instead of 2, and they carried something in, not out, in, a case of some kind, long and flat. William stepped back to let her in. Smoky sniffed her hand with professional thoroughness, and then returned to his position by the window, the specific window that faced the direction of number 6. "How long were they inside?" William asked. 40 minutes. I timed it." Eunice produced a small spiral notebook from her cardigan pocket. She had, William realized with a rush of genuine warmth, been keeping her own notes. "I've been logging it for 3 weeks. Every visit. Time in, time out, number of individuals. Direction of transfer." He looked at the notebook. It was meticulous. Column formatted, dated, consistent. 31 years of grading papers had produced habits that proved surprisingly applicable to surveillance documentation. "Eunice," William said carefully, "have you noticed any smell from that property? Anything chemical? Anything that seems out of place?" She considered it seriously, in the way she once considered whether a student's wrong answer revealed genuine misunderstanding or careless reading. "There is something," she said, "sometimes in the early morning, a sort of sharp smell. I assumed it was industrial cleaning products." William looked at Smoky. Smoky was still watching number 6. "Chemical, delivered in cases, late-night transfers." A neighbor who had worked very hard to remove William from the area before he'd had the chance to notice. The shape of it was getting clearer. William trusted Smoky's nose the way other men trusted GPS. More, actually, because GPS had taken him wrong twice, and Smoky had never once been wrong. Smoky had been trained, in his operational years, to detect a specific list of substances, weapons residue, explosive compounds, and in a later phase of his service that William almost never talked about, a class of chemical, precursors associated with certain kinds of manufacturing, the kind that happened in residential properties when someone wanted to avoid industrial oversight. William wasn't ready to draw that conclusion yet. He was a careful man. He'd seen situations where a careful man's restraint had saved him from catastrophic wrong action, and he respected that lesson. But the dog didn't lie. On Wednesday morning at 6 a.m., William took Smoky for their usual route, the same loop they walked every day, consistent, predictable, boring to any observer. They passed number 6 on the return leg. William maintained his normal pace. Smoky's nose hit the air and he pulled, hard, decisively, toward the side of the renter property. Not a curious pull, the way dogs investigate interesting smells. An insistent directional, operational pull. The kind that in a different context would have had William calling it in on a secure line within 30 seconds. William corrected him gently, kept walking. Back home, he sat at the kitchen table and opened his laptop. He typed 2 searches. One about Dean Renner's private equity consulting, which produced no results, no company listings, no professional profiles. Nothing that a man genuinely engaged in private equity would lack. The second search was about chemical indicators detectable by trained K9 units that would be consistent with Eunice's description of a sharp, chemical early morning smell. The results aligned in a way that made something cold settle behind William's ribs. He closed the laptop and made coffee. He thought about who to call. Marcus Webb had retired from the DEA 14 months before William moved to Callaway Lane. But retirement for men like Marcus was more of a change in business cards than a change in function. He still consulted. He still knew people. He still answered his phone at 7 in the morning when a former collaborative contact called. "Wynne," he said, in the way of someone who files names by face rather than sentiment. "What's wrong?" William described it without editorializing. The van schedule, the case transfers, the chemical alerts from Smoky, the impossibly clean online absence of Renner's stated profession, the organized campaign to remove William from proximity. Marcus was quiet for a moment. "What's the address?" William gave it. "Give me 48 hours, Marcus said. "Don't approach the property. Don't let the dog alert visibly in public again. If this is what it sounds like, you don't want them knowing the dogs made them." "Already managed that," William said. "He's a professional. So's whoever's running that house. Potentially." Marcus paused. "William, you said they tried to get you removed. Did it work?" "No." "Good." Another pause. Because if Smoky's reading what I think he might be reading, the worst possible outcome here was you leaving before anyone connected the dots. William ended the call and sat with that for a moment. Then he went to find Smoky, who was asleep in a patch of morning sun, his black and tan coat warm and his scarred flank rising and falling with the total peace of a creature who had already done his job and was waiting for the humans to catch up. The second HOA meeting happened because Gerald Marsh petitioned for one. The stated agenda item was safety review of domestic animal policies, transparently targeted, executed with the confidence of a man who had never been seriously challenged on anything. William attended again. This time Eunice Faber sat beside him, her spiral notebook in her lap, her retired teacher posture suggesting she had not come to observe. Gerald opened with a prepared statement about community responsibility and the welfare of residents, particularly families with young children, and William let him run through it without interruption because he found, now, that he could listen to Gerald Marsh the way he listened to rainfall, present but not affecting. When Gerald finished, Sandra Briggs asked if anyone wished to respond. Eunice Faber raised her hand. She spoke for 4 minutes. She cited specific HOA bylaws by section number. She noted that Smoky held current AKC Canine Good Citizen certification, AK9 operative credential, and a behavioral assessment letter from a licensed veterinary behaviorist. She noted that no documented incident involving the dog had ever been recorded in any official capacity. She noted that the same neighbor who had organized the original petition, here she looked at Renner, who was seated in the back row, had done so within days of William moving in, before any of the behaviors cited as concerns that had time to occur. Which suggests, Eunice said, with the patient precision of a woman who had corrected 31 years of circular reasoning, that the concern was never about behavior. It was about presence. Renner left before the meeting concluded. He didn't look at William on his way out. Smoky watched him go with the patient amber eyes of a dog who was keeping his own kind of notes. 47 hours later, 6:22 a.m. William was on the porch with his coffee when his phone rang. Smoky raised his head from the decking boards. The LLC that owns that property was incorporated 18 months ago, Marcus said, without preamble. Renner's name doesn't appear anywhere in the documentation. The registered agent is a law firm in the Cayman Islands. The property itself was purchased cash. William said nothing. Let Marcus continue. The van you've been logging belongs to a logistics company that appears in our system as a known associate of a distribution network. Not a big one, regional, but active. Marcus's voice carried the controlled flatness of someone reading from a file while managing their own reaction to its contents. Smoky alert to synthetics? Yes, William said. That's consistent. Marcus exhaled. Here's the position. William, we have enough for a surveillance warrant. We do not have enough for a raid. What I need from you is patience and continued non-engagement with the property. I know how this works. I know you know. I'm saying it anyway because the last time I worked with military contact in a similar situation, he engaged on day 9 and blew the entire case. Marcus paused. You're not going to do that. No, William agreed. Keep the dog inside when you're not walking him. Don't alter your routine. You are a retired veteran who fixes his fence and drinks coffee on his porch. A dry pause, which, from what you're telling me, seems to be threatening enough to 11 people already. William almost smiled. 48 more hours, Marcus said. Then we move. It was Eunice who put together, and she told William over tea at her kitchen table on a gray Thursday afternoon, with the careful precision of someone laying down cards in a sequence. He knew who you were before you moved in, she said. I'm certain of it. William looked at her over his mug. The petition was organized that fast. You'd barely unpacked. How does a neighbor know enough about your personal history to put in a formal complaint unless he researched you beforehand? She tapped her notebook. And why would he research a new neighbor unless your presence specifically threatened him? William had considered this. Hearing it from Eunice, laid out in that methodical retired teacher logic, made it sharper. He knew about Smoky, William said quietly. The K-9 training, the certification. He knew what kind of dog this was. Eunice nodded, and he tried to have him removed. The implication settled in the warm kitchen like something heavy set down on a table. Dean Renner hadn't organized a neighborhood petition because William and Smoky were a nuisance. He'd organized it because William and Smoky were a threat, a specific, expert threat, to whatever was happening inside number 6. He'd known at the moment he'd looked up the new neighbor's background and found a 22-year military career centered on K-9 operations and contraband detection. He'd tried to remove the only person on the street capable of recognizing what he was running. Eunice, William said, I need to ask you to stay away from number 6 for the next few days. She looked at him steadily over her tea. Is something going to happen? I think so, yes. She nodded once, closed her notebook, and refilled his mug. Friday night, 11:51 p.m. William was awake. He was always awake at this hour, the operational wiring of his brain refusing the full shutdown that other men called sleep. sitting in the dark of his living room with Smoky beside him. No lights, no television, just the ambient sound of suburban street in autumn and the dog's warm weight against his leg. The white van rolled onto Callaway Lane at 11:58. Different plates again. Same configuration. Box van, no markings. Moving at the careful pace of something that didn't want to be noticed. Smoky's head lifted. William put his hand on the dog's back, not restraining, just present. Smoky's body was a landscape of tension, every muscle engaged, the black and tan coat making him almost invisible in the dark room. But he held. He'd been trained to hold. And 7 years of trust between them made holding possible even when every trained instinct said now. The van stopped at number 6. Side doors always. 2 men this time, moving something large, rectangular, covered. They moved quickly, with the efficiency of rehearsed action. William memorized details. License plate, physical descriptions, time, duration. He sent a text to Marcus. Van. 2 persons. Large transfer, covered item. 11:58 arrival. The response came back in 40 seconds. Logged. We're watching. Hold position. William sat in the dark and held position. Smoky's tail moved once, slowly, in the darkness. Not excitement, but acknowledgement. His partner was here. They were doing the thing they were trained to do, which was wait until the waiting was over. The van left at 12:34 a.m. Callaway Lane returned to its careful, manicured quiet. And somewhere in a surveillance vehicle 2 blocks away, men who understood what Smoky had been signaling for 3 weeks were finally in position. It came at 6:15 a.m. on a Saturday. William heard it before he saw it. The specific audio texture of multiple vehicles moving in coordinated silence. The kind of precision that didn't belong to garbage trucks or delivery services. He was already at his window. For vehicles, 2 unmarked, 1 county sheriff's vehicle, 1 that had no markings at all, and the particular utilitarian design that William associated with federal agency motor pools. They moved down Callaway Lane with the unhurried certainty of entities that had their paperwork in order. They stopped at number 6. Smoky was at the window beside William, absolutely still, watching with the amber eyes of a dog who had been waiting for exactly this resolution and found it entirely satisfactory. The operation was professional and rapid. William counted 8 personnel approaching the property. Front door, side door back, covered simultaneously. The way it was done when you didn't want anything exiting a building before you were ready for it to exit. Lights came on in number 6. Lights came on across Callaway Lane. William watched as Dean Renner was walked out his front door in handcuffs at 6:23 a.m. He was in a bathrobe. His practiced composure had not survived the morning intact. Behind him came Claire, equally restrained, her face wearing an expression of someone who had calculated odds for a long time and had finally run out of favorable ones. Callaway Lane was awake now. Front porches filling. Gerald Marsh in his doorway in pajamas. His clipboard nowhere in evidence. Patricia Holden's hand at her mouth. The Delacroix couple watching from an upstairs window with an expression William couldn't quite read from this distance. He watched all of it from his porch, holding his coffee with both hands, Smoky pressed against his left leg. Marcus Webb crossed the lawn toward him 20 minutes later. "Your dog," Marcus said, looking at Smoky with an expression of genuine professional respect, "has a better nose than two of my analysts." Marcus came inside for coffee. He was the kind of man who wore government work the way William wore military service. Not obviously, but structurally, in the way he sat and how his eyes moved. He talked for 17 minutes. William listened. Number 6 had been running a synthesis and storage operation for a controlled substance that had been moving through 3 counties for the better part of a year. Not the largest operation Marcus had worked. He was clear about that, without false drama, but sophisticated in its residential concealment, the cash property purchase, the offshore LLC, the use of a residential address in an upscale neighborhood where neither law enforcement nor nosy neighbors would expect to look, except they hadn't accounted for a retired K-9 handler with 22 years of detection experience moving in 3 doors down, or for the dog. "The chemical storage in the basement," Marcus said, wrapping his hands around the mug, "is consistent with what Smoky was alerting to. The compound has a distinct signature that trained detection animals can pick up at significant range under the right atmospheric conditions." He looked at Smoky, who was monitoring the activity outside with focused attention. "Your dog was alerting from 3 properties away through closed windows. That's exceptional sensitivity." "He's always been exceptional," William said simply. "The campaign to remove you, the petition, the HOA complaints, the animal control visits, will establish that as part of the conspiracy case. Renner researched you within days of your move-in date, your service record, Smoky's credentials, the detection specialization." Marcus paused. "He tried to use your own history against you to get you out of range." William absorbed this. "It didn't work," he said. "No," Marcus agreed. "It didn't." By noon, the evidence response vehicles were still at number 6, and Callaway Lane had the specific energy of a community that had been somewhere it hadn't expected to find itself. Subdued, uncertain. The usual rhythms, the weekend lawn work, the car washing, the children's bicycle circuits, were suspended in favor of something quieter and less certain. Gerald Marsh crossed Williams' property at 12:30. He didn't have his clipboard. That detail felt significant. He stood at the edge of Williams' lawn with the expression of a man who had prepared several different versions of this conversation and wasn't sure which one applied anymore. "I owe you an apology," he said finally. "It came out with the texture of something that had required real effort to produce. The petition, the HOA complaints. I didn't know what was actually happening next door. Renner told me you were." He stopped, rerouted. "He told me some things about your background. He was persuasive. I was used," William offered, not unkindly. Gerald looked up. The ruddiness had left his face. "Yes, I suppose that's what I was." William let a moment sit between them, not punitive, just honest. "Do you know what Smoky is?" Gerald blinked. "He's a trained detection specialist with a perfect operational record. The thing that made you uncomfortable, the way he watches, the way he behaves on walks, his reaction to specific properties, that's not aggression. That's expertise." William looked at the dog, who was watching Gerald with calm professional attention. He was doing his job. He'd been doing it since the first week we arrived. Gerald Marsh looked at Smoky for a long moment. "I'm sorry," he said, to both of them, it seemed. She came in the afternoon, unannounced, wearing the same pearls as a committee meeting, but without the committee meeting's prepared energy. She looked older and natural-like, or perhaps just more honest. William was on the porch. Smoky was in his afternoon sunspot on the boards, making a gentle occasional sound that was his version of contentment. Patricia stood at the foot of the porch steps and looked at the dog for a while before she looked at William. "I said your history might have changed you," she said quietly. "That was a terrible thing to say. I've been thinking about it since this morning." William said nothing. "My concern about your military background, I wrapped it in language about the neighborhood, about families, about safety. But what I was actually doing was assuming things about you based on fear of what I didn't understand." She met his moss-green eyes with the difficulty of someone doing something hard. "That's not who I want to be." William considered her. The sun-kissed lines of his face, the deep forehead wrinkles, the box beard going silver, none of it moved toward easy forgiveness or easy rejection. "I appreciate you saying it," he said. "It's not enough." "No," he agreed, "but it's something." She nodded. She looked at Smoky one more time, at the black and tan coat, the powerful build, the amber eyes watching her with no malice. "He's beautiful," she said, with genuine surprise, as though she was seeing him for the first time, which in all the ways that mattered, she was. "He knows," William said. Smoky's tail moved once. The Delacroix couple was different from the others, and William had known it since the committee meeting, while Gerald Marsh had been performing and Patricia Holden had been fearful. The Delacroix couple, Miriam and Claude, late 50s, quiet, their house always properly maintained, had avoided eye contact with a specific deliberateness that suggested not hostility, but discomfort. The discomfort of people who know something they're not sure they should have known. They came together, which felt like a collective decision made after private discussion. Claude Delacroix was a compact man with the reserved manner of someone who chose words carefully and meant them when they came. Miriam was taller, with silver-streaked hair, and the posture of someone who had made peace with difficult things before. "We signed the petition," Claude said. "Renner came to our door. He said he had documentation, or what looked like documentation, about concerns related to your discharge status. He said there were behavioral flags." He paused. "We didn't verify it. We should have." "Why are you telling me this?" William asked, not accusatory, genuinely asking. "Because we've been living next to a drug operation for we don't know how long," Miriam said, with a flatness that held something unprocessed inside it. "And the person who figured it out was the person we signed papers against." She looked at Smoky. "How long was the dog signaling?" 3 weeks after we arrived," William said. "The Delacroix absorbed this." "He was telling you for over a year," Miriam said softly. "He was telling anyone who knew how to listen," William corrected gently. "I was the only one on this street who'd been trained to hear it." Marcus Webb came back on Monday with coffee from a place off Mineral Street, and the specific demeanor of a man carrying official information. "The complaint records," he said, sitting across from William at the kitchen table. "The animal control visits, the HOA notices, the parking citations, all of it is being reviewed as part of conspiracy documentation." Renner made calls. He had contact in places that made some of those complaints move faster than they should have. Marcus set down a folder. "There's a process for having those records corrected and removed. It'll take some paperwork on your end." "I can manage paperwork," William said. "I know you can." Marcus looked at Smoky, who was doing his window monitoring with the dedication of a professional on the clock. "The case is solid, William. Between your documentation, Eunice Faber's log, and the operational evidence from Friday, this goes forward." He paused. "You're going to be asked to provide a statement about the K-9 alerts, the timeline, the specific behaviors, the locations. Smoky's training record will be entered as supporting documentation." William nodded. "The DA's office wants to acknowledge, formally, in the case documentation, that the initial detection was K9 alert from a civilian-owned train operative." Marcus met his eyes. "That's not standard. It's a significant acknowledgement." William looked at Smoky. Smoky looked back at him with those amber eyes, the black and tan coat warm in the morning light, the scar flank barely visible. 7 years. For deployments, a medical evacuation, a retirement, a neighborhood that had tried to push them both out. "He deserves it," William said. He brought her flowers, yellow ones, from the farmer's market on Clement Street, because she'd mentioned once that she preferred market flowers to florist arrangements. She opened the door before he'd knocked, because Smoky's footfall on her porch was apparently now recognizable to her. "I heard from Marcus," she said, stepping back to let them in. "He called to tell me the notebook would be useful for case." "Your documentation was better than most official surveillance logs I've worked with," William said. Eunice waved this away with the modesty of someone who knew it was true. She put the flowers in a tall blue vase, and Smoky moved to his preferred spot by her window. He'd apparently decided Eunice's house had an acceptable sight line, and lowered himself to the floor with the gravitas of a large creature that had earned its rest. "I want to ask you something," Eunice said, setting tea in front of him. "And you don't have to answer." He waited. "When did you first know? Really know, not just suspect?" William thought about it honestly. "The first night Smoky alerted on the drive home. I didn't know specifically then. I knew something was wrong. And I knew it was at that house. But I also knew that without corroboration, I had nothing but a retired veteran's instinct and a dog that the neighborhood already wanted removed." Eunice nodded. "So you waited?" "I waited." She looked at Smoky. He was watching something through her window with great focus. "You and that dog," she said, with something close to wonder in her voice, "are the most patient creatures I have ever encountered." William almost smiled. "He taught me?" October deepened into itself, and Callaway Lane changed in the small, specific ways that places change after something significant has moved through them. The Renner property sat empty and taped, its manicure precision gradually softening at the edges the way properties do when their upkeep is interrupted. The bronze mailbox still stood, lid closed on an address that received no mail. Gerald Marsh's HOA communications arrived without the edge they used to carry. He'd sent William a note, written by hand this time, not typed, suggesting that if Smoky needed space to run, the small green at the end of the lane was available on weekday mornings when it was typically empty. Patricia Holden had started saying good morning, not every day, but often enough that it had become a thing, a small recalibration of how two people occupied the same space. The Delacroix couple had invited him for dinner. He'd gone, because it had been offered without performance, and because Miriam Delacroix was apparently an exceptional cook of a specific Haitian dish that he hadn't tasted since a deployment layover in Port-au-Prince in 2009. Eunice had begun leaving a book on his porch every 2 weeks, something from her personal library, usually history, occasionally fiction, always with a small paper note inside indicating why she selected it for him specifically. He read all of them. He left the notes in the kitchen drawer. And every morning at 6, William and Smoky made their loop of Callaway Lane. The same route, the same pace. The dog's broad head up, the black and tan coat, catching whatever light the morning offered. The amber eyes moving with the patient vigilance of a creature who understood his purpose and found it sufficient. The street had tried to remove them. They had stayed. The DA's office was in a building that smelled of institutional carpeting and filtered air, and William sat in a chair designed for a shorter person and gave his formal statement in a room with one window and a recorder on the table. He described everything in the order it had happened: the letter under the door, the committee meeting, the first alert, Eunice's observations, the van schedule, Marcus's involvement, the morning of the operation. The assistant DA was a woman named Carver, early 40s, the focused brevity of someone who had learned to move efficiently through large quantities of human difficulty. The dog's alerts, she said, after the statement recorder was off. Were they ever ambiguous to you? Did you ever doubt what he was signaling? William considered the question seriously. Smoky's alerts have a specific quality that distinguishes incidental interest from operational detection. In 22 years working together, I've never misread an operational alert. He paused. I doubted my interpretation sometimes, whether the specific compound was what I thought, whether the volume was significant, but I never doubted the alert itself. Carver looked at a point past his shoulder. He saved the case. You know, the timing. If the operation had run another season without being flagged, they were planning to move the distribution network to a larger facility. We'd have lost the chain. William absorbed this. We almost weren't here, he said. They almost succeeded in pushing us out. But they didn't, Carver said. No, William said. They didn't. He went home and told Smoky, because it seemed like the appropriate thing to do. William had spent enough time around military psychologists and behavioral specialists to have heard, many times, the clinical explanations for what dogs like Smoky actually experienced, whether the concept of understanding was the right word, whether what looked like loyalty was instinct, whether what felt like partnership was simple conditioning. He had a view about this, arrived at over 22 years, and refined in particular crucible of 4 deployments that had nothing to do with clinical frameworks. Smoky knew, not in the way humans knew things, with language and narrative and the specific grief of retrospection. In his own way, Immediate sensory complete. He knew that the house 3 doors down had held something dangerous and was now empty of it. He knew that the people who had looked at him with hostility had subsequently approached with different body language. He knew that his partner had been under a kind of pressure for several months and was no longer under it. William watched him sleeping in the afternoon sun on the porch, the 70-pound body entirely relaxed, the scarred flank rising and falling, the powerful jaw loose, and thought about what it meant to share this specific life with this specific creature. The German shepherd had been AK-9 operative, a detection specialist, a combat veteran in his own category, with his own scars and his own record. He'd been doubted, feared, petitioned against, and complained about. He'd done his job anyway, through all of it, in all the ways he knew how, with all the training and trust that 22 years between them had built. The afternoon sun moved across the porch boards. Smoky's tail moved in his sleep. William drank his coffee and let the quiet be exactly what it was. The letter arrived 6 weeks after the operation. This one came through the post, properly stamped, with the return address of the Hargrove County Housing Committee on the upper left. William opened it at the kitchen table, with Smoky's chin on his knee. It was a formal letter of clarification, in measured official language. It stated that the petition filed against William Wynne of address had been reviewed in light of subsequent developments and found to have been submitted under materially false pretenses by a signatory later charged in connection with a federal case. The committee wished to confirm that no adverse action had been taken, that the record of petition had been struck, and that Mr. Wynne remained a resident in full standing with no outstanding concerns. Attached was a second document, one he hadn't expected, a letter from the county sheriff's office acknowledging Smoky's role in the detection chain that had initiated the federal investigation. Formally worded but genuine, the kind of acknowledgement that didn't happen often for civilian dogs. William read it twice. Then he set it on the table, pulled out his pen, and wrote 2 words at the bottom of the sheriff's letter. Well done. He held it out to Smoky. The dog sniffed it once, briefly. Then he looked up at William with those amber eyes on the broad black forehead, the tan markings bright in the morning light, the muscular body loose and present and entirely itself. William folded the letter carefully. He put it in the kitchen drawer with Eunice's book notes. Then he stood up, took Smoky's leaf from the hook by the door, and said the words that always meant the same thing after 22 years. Let's go. They walked the loop at 6:15 the next morning, as they always did. The air had the specific cold of late October, clean and carrying, the kind that made everything smell precise. Smoky moved at his heel, in the heel position that was not a command anymore, but simply where he chose to be, his black and tan coat moving with the easy athleticism of a working animal at pace. Callaway Lane was quiet. The bronze mailboxes stood in their row. The manicured lawns held the silver of early frost. Number 6 sat sealed and silent, its perfection now a kind of evidence. As they passed number 11, Eunice Faber's porch light came on. She was an early riser and had apparently begun timing her coffee to their footfall. She raised her mug from the doorway. William raised his hand. Smoky's tail moved. They continued. Past number 4, where a light was on in the kitchen. Past number 7, where Gerald Marsh's truck sat exactly within his own driveway. Past number 9, where the Delacroix couple's garden had been properly put to bed for the season. A neighborhood that had tried to push them out. A dog that had never stopped doing his job. A man who had learned over 22 years that the most important thing you could do when someone tried to make you invisible was to remain clearly and completely exactly where you were. The sun came up over Callaway Lane. William Wynne, 50 years old, broad-shouldered and square-jawed. The salt and pepper was cut catching the morning light, and the deep moss-green eyes calm, walked his dog home. Smoky pressed against his left leg, the same as always, the way it would continue,